Hey, what up, everybody? My name is Ryan Bones Colpitts. Some of you guys might know me as Coach Wessos from Ka'a to Sabes. And today we're going to talk about something that I kind of have struggled with a lot throughout my journey of life. It's trust. Now, I have trust issues because a lot of times I like to lean on myself. I can trust myself 100%, but trusting other people, see, that's where I get a little bit caught up. Now, the Bible says that we should trust God with absolutely everything and that we should not lean on our own understanding. That's found in Proverbs 3:5-6. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding." Now, 6 says, "In all your ways acknowledge him and he shall make your paths straight." I want to focus on 5 right here because sometimes I think we look to 6 because we want to benefit from trusting in God. However, we will benefit in trusting in God. But do we only trust in God because we simply need to, or do we do it only for the benefit? You see, verse 5 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and rely not on your own understanding." When we rely on our own understanding, we fall into something called sin. A lot of times because our heart is deceitful. When we focus on what we know and how we feel about things, we're going to fall into our flesh, into lust, into temptation, into anger, to hate, all of these things. However, God tells us to just trust in him, to trust his characteristics, to trust his word. But how do we trust someone that we don't know? And that's the problem I find with so many students that I get to talk to, and including myself. How do I trust God, yet I don't, in a sense, know who he is? I don't know his characteristics. It's simple. We get to know him. We open our word, we read stories from the Old Testament to see how he acted. We see what the New Testament tells us his promises are for us today. This reminds me of an old book back in the day called Daniel. That's further from Proverbs. You're going to flip. You're going to go to Daniel chapter 3. And it talks about these 3 guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And I love this story so much that I want to name one of my kids Abednego. But that's not just because of the story. It's also because it's going to be really easy to tell them to go places. Abednego to your room. Abednego clean up. So that's just a little side note, little fun for you guys. But in this story, King Nebuchadnezzar, who was king of all the land, said that he was going to he made this huge statue, right? And he said, everyone has to worship this statue, kneel down and worship this statue when they hear the song of the lyre and all these other instruments. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were children of God, believed in God, the one true God, and said, I'm not going to worship this statue. And so Nebuchadnezzar got mad. He said, whoa, here, man, listen up. You can't do that. If you do that, I'm going to throw you into a burning fire. Now, let's think about this. Our own understanding of fire is what? That it's hot, extremely hot. And if I'm thrown into a furnace, my own understanding is going to tell me that I will probably burn up and die. However, we need to not lean on our own understanding and trust in the character of God. That's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did. But they didn't seek benefit from it. Here, Shadrach in Daniel 3:16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king Nebuchadnezzar. He said, we don't need to give you an answer to this question. If the God we serve exists, then he can rescue us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he can rescue us from the power of you, the king. Verse 18 is so important. It says, but even if he does not rescue us, we want you as king to know that we will not serve your gods or worship the gold statue you set up. You see, they trusted in the character of God, but they trusted that God would have a plan for them regardless of anything worked out to their understanding. That's when verse 6 comes back into play. You know, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he shall make your path straight. Ultimately, in this story, they were delivered from the fire. They were delivered from King Nebuchadnezzar. His anger and hatred, and King Nebuchadnezzar was shown the love of God. When we trust God with our own understanding, we need to not rely on what we see the situation as, but instead die to that and instead grab the mentality of Christ, as it says in Romans 12:2, where it says, do not be conformed to this age, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you may discern what is good, pleasing, and perfect will of God. We need to start to change our mentality to look like Christ's mentality. How do we do that? By trusting him. How do we do that? By getting in our word. by praying, by having conversations, by seeing his characteristics so that we can trust in those good and appeasing and perfect characteristics. I know this isn't easy. I know this can be hard sometimes because I struggle with it myself. However, I urge you guys to trust God, to get into your word, to understand his character, to ask questions to people around you that know God and know his character so that you can trust him in any circumstance in your life, regardless of if it's an easy circumstance or, as Damaris has said earlier, if it's a trial that you're going through, that we can trust in God, in his sovereignty, knowing that he will make our path straight, but even if he doesn't, his character is still perfect above all else.